The Pentagon has begun a review of medical standards for serving in the military. And while gays, lesbians, and bisexuals are now allowed to serve openly, transgender people are not. Landon Wilson was thrown out of the Navy last year after his commander found out that he is transgender. Dr. John LaPook has his story.
It was a command sergeant major in Afghanistan who pulled me to his office, and he said, "I need to know exactly what you are."
What Landon Wilson was transgender. In his case, born biologically a female, but living as a male. His commanding officer uncovered his secret at the end of 2013 while reviewing then 23-year-old Wilson for a promotion. He was forced to leave the military with an honorable discharge.
What went through your head as you were packing up your gear to leave?
My main concern was who was going to take my spot. When you're in a place like that, you can't really afford to lose anybody.
You were worried about your buddies, about the mission.
Absolutely.
Wilson had enlisted as a female, then decided to transition. That meant beginning to live and express himself as the gender he identified with. He took male hormones, and by the time he was deployed to a new unit with military intelligence in Afghanistan, he looked and sounded masculine and was placed in a male barracks.
What was that like?
It was the best experience of my entire military career. It was probably the only time that I knew 100% that I could focus on my job without worrying about my gender coming into play.
Mara Kiesling, who transitioned 15 years ago, is the executive director of the National Center for Transgender Equality.
Transgender people are people whose gender identity, that is their internal sense of their gender, just doesn't line up with what the doctor told our parents when we were born. Is it a boy or a girl?
From the age of 3 or 4, Wilson felt his gender was male.
I remember announcing proudly to my mom that this whole girl thing just wasn't cut out for me. And I recognized then that the reaction I got wasn't probably the best.
You somehow got the message this was not something anybody wanted to hear about.
It was just, this is how things are and this is how they're going to be.
A 2011 survey by the National Center for Transgender Equality found 41% of transgender people had attempted suicide. The decision to transition can bring a sense of peace.
There's a relief in saying, you know what, this is who I am. There's a relief in saying, this is what I'm going to do.
Transitioning may or may not involve hormones or surgery.
Can you explain to people why whether you have the operation or not is really irrelevant to you?
It doesn't change who you are as a person. How we see ourselves and how we present ourselves to the world is much more important than the underlying layers of what's under our clothes or what could be under our clothes. Gender is completely independent of your sex.
It's difficult for people to understand that a person's biological sex can be different from a person's gender. Ignorance about that has led to discrimination for transgender people in all walks of life, not just the military. And as for Landon Wilson, Scott, he says if he could re-enlist, he'd do it in a heartbeat.
John, thanks. Thanks very much.